What's going on, everybody? Good morning, good evening, wherever you are and whatever time it is. So welcome back to another video with your man, Masaesyli. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another faction overview for the Divided Impera overall mod for Total War Rome 2. Today, we are moving to Africa and we are checking out the Masaesyli. The Masaesyli are basically your representatives of Numidia. As such, their roster is entirely Numidian, as is their people. So, before we jump into the part 1 section where we check out the campaign, first off, we'll do our little preview where we'll check out the buffs and debuffs for the faction, and then we'll jump in to the grand campaign. So, obviously, we need to talk about what culture you belong to. Like I said, you're Numidian, and as such, you belong to the Adamum Africanum subcultural group, which basically consists of the Masaesyli and the Madawi over in Eastern Africa, or Northern Africa. Anyway, you share the following 2 buffs with the Madawi. You have the Agrarian Wisdom perk, which gives you plus 10% wealth from agricultural buildings. Fairly helpful, and it is also fairly indicative of what is expected of you economically speaking. Trade won't be easy for you since you don't have a coastal settlement early on, so hopefully that little buff will help you get things started there with your economy. You then have the Desert Warriors perk, which gives you plus 10% morale for all units during battles in the desert. And you will be fighting in the desert, it's just not clear on who you will be fighting in the desert, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Now we'll get down to the buffs and debuffs specifically just for the Masaesyli. So you have the hit and run buff, which gives you increased reload for cavalry. So you reload your skirmisher cavalry a lot faster than normal, which is very nice. And then you also have the horse masters buff, which gives you an increased rank for all cavalry units. Very, very helpful indeed. And in addition, it's worth noting, you start off as a tribal confederation, and tribal confederations actually have a +1 increase for all military units upon recruitment as well. So your cavalry units are going to be insanely experienced as soon as you recruit them, which makes a really big difference, especially when you're going up against tougher militaries, which will pretty much be everyone around you. And then you have the Suspicious of Rome debuff, which decreases your diplomacy with Latin cultures, aka Rome. You and Rome will struggle to get on, and even if you do, that will still always be kind of naggy in the side. However, it's very unlikely you'll be able to establish relations with Rome unless you really play your hand right, give them a lot of money, declare war on their enemies, the whole shebang. But that will eat away at you a little bit, and as such, it is kind of indicative as to what is expected of the Masaesyli, which is to support their Carthaginian masters. But anyway, let's get into that a little bit more shortly when we get into the part 1 section of this video. So I shall see you guys there. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the grand campaign for the Masaesyli. So, you are not a one-hit quitter faction for this overview. Instead, you actually have 2 hits before you are a quitter. You have Carthage here, which is your capital. It also contains your only military force at the beginning of the campaign, which is a general, which is your leader, known as an Agalit apparently. Then you have the General's Bodyguard, Numidian spearmen, some Numidian skirmishers, and then skirmishers that are just infantry. All of that just inside of Carthage. And then you have your second city down here to the southwest in the settlement known as Demidi. That's pretty much it though. You do also have a spy that is down here to the south. I'm not sure what she's doing all the way down here. There's not really a lot for her to go see. You already know where the provinces are and the cities are to your east all the way to Cyrenaica, which is actually pretty good. To your west though, you do have a settlement out here that you don't have actual diplomatic relations with. I'm not too sure why, but at the beginning of the campaign you can only have diplomacy with 3 different factions. So you might want to send your spy that way if you do want to try and get relations with them. It's up to you. Otherwise, you might be better served to send your spy up into Sicily and Italy or over to Iberia. But now let's move on and discuss our next point, which is of course diplomacy. We have to talk about diplomacy first because this is a very unique faction in that I believe it's our first faction overview where we've done an overview of a faction that is a client state at the start of the campaign. Carthage basically owns you. You are a client state of Carthage, which is a very big deal. Basically, what it means is that they will offer you protection in exchange for sending them tribute every single turn. And if you want to know how much tribute you're giving them, you can just go to your diplomacy with Carthage down here, and then you can hover over the what do you call it? The treaty that says that you're a client state. And right here on turn 1, you're giving them 226 denarii or coin, whatever you want to call it, per turn to be under their protection, basically. That's pretty much what it is. You also have a trade agreement with them, and you have military access. You do not have an alliance with them because you're a client state. You're supposed to do what you're told. You are expected to join their wars when they invite you to do so, although they don't always have to invite you. And if they don't invite you, then you don't have to join the war, which is a pretty good example because Carthage actually starts at war with Epirus, and you do not. In fact, none of the client states of Carthage start at war with Epirus, which is very interesting. But it is worth noting. Furthermore, what other relations do you have? You have the Masaesyli to your south. They are also another client state of Carthage. However, they actually don't have any relations with you whatsoever. So that will probably be one of your things you do in turn 1. Get some trade, non-aggression, maybe an alliance. I'm not sure. Will they do it? Yeah, they're very keen. This is all on normal difficulty, of course, but yeah, because they are also a client state of Carthage, they're actually very friendly to you. You share the same culture. You're basically both Numidian. They're just like an offshoot branch. Then you also have the Harriman, faction down here. I believe that's also known as the Garamantians down there. Yeah, that is, because that's Garama. Okay. So you have the Garamantians down here. They're also quite friendly. However, you can't get trade with them. Yeah, no, you can't because you don't border them. Which will lead us into a very big issue shortly where we talk about your economy. But we're not just there yet. Before we get to your economy, I do want to note one thing that you need to consider while you're a client state of Carthage. Being a client state of Carthage does not guarantee that they will be friendly with you. Carthage has literally I'm not messing around, I'm not exaggerating, they have literally declared war on me in my test campaigns as the Masaesyli on turn 1. I didn't do anything else but get relations with their client state, the Masaesyli down here. They literally declared war on me on turn 1. I've seen that before multiple times, actually. It wasn't just once. You can't trust Carthage. You can't trust any ally, really, in any Total War Rome 2 campaign, but especially not here. It is unlikely that Carthage will declare war on you, especially if you do things that will help them like you even more. For example, you really should join their war against Epirus. Not only will you have to not actually do anything, but you'll have, because Epirus is all the way over here, so you won't really get involved against Epirus unless they land in Carthage, which they can, but that's usually when Rome is helping them. But in addition, you can also get some money out of it since they are obviously very keen to have you on board, which would be helpful because your economy is pretty crap at the early game. But yeah, that is just a big point about your diplomacy I want you guys to note. Basically, at the end of the day, the diplomacy in Total War Rome 2 is random. That's how CA created the diplomacy. It's basically a dice roll on what the AI is going to decide to do every single turn. Now, DEI has made it so the AI should make decisions that make more sense, or it's more likely that they will, but they can't guarantee it every single time without railroading the campaign too much. So do be aware, Carthage can betray you at any single point in the campaign, as can the Masaesyli and any other faction. So do not get lulled into a false sense of security that you are snuggled up here in the mountains above Carthage and that you can go and do whatever you want and just cruise around and take over settlements elsewhere. You need to be considerate of your place at home. But now that I've railed that point home, let's move on to your economy and population. So like I said, your economy is quite poor at the beginning. We have an income of only 1,800 at the start. Again, it is in winter, but generally winter in the Western Mediterranean isn't really all that harsh unless you're going up into Gaul. So your economy won't be fluctuating too much. In addition, this is also with just having 4 units. However, the majority of your units do have a low income, so that is good news for you. You have your Numidian noble cavalry as a general's bodyguard, and this is quite possibly your best cavalry unit you get. In fact, I would argue that they are your best. You also have Numidian cavalry that are skirmishers, which are fantastic, but your noble cav are fantastic as well, and they're also skirmishers. So I would argue they're probably the best cav unit that you have, and they only cost 281 per turn. So even though your economy is trash at the start, it's not too terrible because you can still field at least one full stack army, maybe one and a half if you push your taxes and build the right things very quickly. So how do you get money as a Masaesyli? Well, obviously you can't get trade because you do not own any coastal settlements. Now, if you like, you could get an army and rush to the west very quickly and take over the settlement here owned by the Cthulhu, which is a coastal settlement. However, because it wouldn't be connected directly to your settlements here, I believe you still wouldn't be able to use it to get trade. If that's the case, I can't say for certain if it is, but if it is the case, all you will need to do is change your capital to over here. And then as long as your capital is connected to the ocean, I believe, again, I'm not 100%, but I believe, then you will still be able to get trade. Or you could just betray Carthage, but that is another point entirely that I will discuss shortly. So that's basically your income. The majority of your income will come from taxes. It won't be from trade, at least not in the early game. And agriculture will be your friend because you actually receive that 10% buff to your agriculture. Remember, we discussed it in the buffs and debuffs. So try to focus on a little bit more agricultural styles of industry if possible. But until then, one way that you could try to make money is by creating small armies and sending them to neutral territories such as the Cthulhu, the Iberians, or even down here against the Garamantians. And send your armies down and have them raid. Raiding is actually really powerful, especially if you get the right buffs for your general to increase the income from raiding. It can be insanely powerful for your economy if you're one of these nations that can't really afford to expand your economy in any other way early on. So consider doing some raiding, but be aware the factions that you're raiding will hate you and they probably will declare war on you. But if you're doing it on factions that are far away, then who cares, right? Just be wary if you're doing it too, is all. So that's basically your economy in a nutshell. It is a struggle, but things are looking pretty good since you do have a low upkeep, and there is potential later on for you to do really good because you're in the heart of Africa, at least North Africa, right? And as such, you have a very valuable province here in Carthage, which is the province of Africa. And then you also have very valuable provinces along the coastline over here, which your home province is actually fairly valuable because you can get a port right here. So that would be very nice. And you have 4 cities, which is always nice to have in a province. But then in the west, you have more resources as well. You have incense down here. You have wine. You have, I believe that's silver. No, that's not silver. That might be iron. Yeah, I think that's iron. We have olives. We have copper. And then there's some gold as well in Iberia. I think possibly up here to the northwest. So you have potential for a very good mid to late game economy, but early on it's going to be a struggle for you. Anyway, moving on for your economy. Let's check out your population. Population can make or break a faction, in my opinion, and for you, quite luckily, you're actually in a decent position. You have 25,000 at Kirthan, and at Demidi you have 20,000 people. Of those 25,000 of your capital, let's check out the statistics. Your nobles take up 1,000, your warriors take up 3,000, and your commoners are at 16,000. Foreigners, which is basically foreign mercenary units, are at 4,900 or 5k. However, the foreigners' social class is not for all mercenaries. It depends on the type of mercenary, and I'll show you here right now. These Iberian mercenaries, they're Iberian, they're from Iberia, hence they're foreigners to this region. And as such, they come from your foreigner population. So that's actually really good because it means that they'll be draining a aspect of your population that won't really get used much anyway. So who cares, right? Use these guys as much as you can. However, your Numidian mercenaries and AOR units and such will be coming from your core population social classes. For example, the African mercenary spearmen here, very basic, almost a levy style spearman unit, come from your commoners population social class, which is actually awesome because that's your biggest social class. It's basically the peasants of your society, the most common basic people, hence they're commoners. 16,000 of them are available on turn 1 for you. That is fantastic. That is a lot of armies of basically trash units that you can use with these. However, not all of your commoner units will be trash, and I say that because we go to here and we check out your Numidian skirmisher cavalry, some of the best cav in the game, at least regarding skirmishing, some of the best skirmishing cav in the game, and they come from your easiest social class to maintain, which is your commoners. This is fantastic. You'll be pumping them out, and they only have a low-ish upkeep of 169, and that's without any benefits or buffs to your general whatsoever. So if you specialize your army enough, it will cost almost nothing to run, which is really insane. It's very, very nice. And we also have that 3 XP rank from the get-go on turn 1, which is just insane. It's very, very impressive. And you can see exactly what those XP buffs do. That's the white sections of your statistics. That's where the change is indicated from experience. But anyway, I just really wanted to highlight that a lot of your units will be coming from the commoners section. However, not all of them. For example, units like warrior elephants will be coming from the warriors. For whatever reason, these Numidian cavalry come from your warriors social class, and they're mercenaries. So I would be hesitant to use them. They do have slightly different stats to your usual Numidians. Or do they, actually? They might not, because these guys have the buff. Let me check that real quick. Melee attack of 11, 8, blah blah blah. Okay. Let's check this one out then. 11, 8. Okay, now it looks like they have the same stats almost. Well, not almost. Yeah, these guys have slightly more missile damage. See, these guys have slightly better stats. Base morale 43. What's this base morale? 43 as well. Yeah, it's not better by a lot. And so I would be relying heavily on these guys to come from your commoners class. But basically, the bottom line is you can afford pretty large armies because of the low upkeep and because they come from your easy social class to maintain, which is basically the poor people. Use the poor people as much as you can and lead a revolution and become socialist Numidia if you like. No, if only, right? That would be amazing. But anyway, the point is that both Dumidi and Kirfan provide you with plenty of population to get you going. It will take you quite a few defeats for these social classes to get decimated. However, you do need to be careful with how many armies you are making, because the more armies you create, the less population you have in your cities, and then the less efficient and productive your settlements will be. It does affect your settlements very, very heavily if you run out of population in an area, so be careful of that. Don't go crazy with your spending. Alrighty, so now we're coming up to my final point of the campaign section, and my final point is basically you have two options when you play as the Masaesyli. Number one, you take the gamble and you try to snuggle up with Carthage and hope that the AI doesn't freak out and that they declare war on you at any point. Not only is it possible they can do it on turn one like they have for me, it's possible they could do it at any time. Any friggin' time they like, they can declare war on you. Chances are if the AI does that, they won't be prepared to. Sometimes it will just choose to do it and their armies will be over in Sicily, Italy, or wherever. However, it is a looming threat, and that is one of your two choices. Basically, you can choose to snuggle up with Carthage, and if you do that, then you can send your armies either east or northeast, basically, into Sicily and Italy, and take over these settlements in the name of Carthage. Obviously, you keep them yourself, but you help out your Carthaginian allies. Try to balance having your armies attack the settlements with Carthage's. You could even go east into Africa, especially if Carthage declares war on Cyrenaica or Egypt. Or you could do probably the little bit more likely option of going west into Iberia and having settlements that are basically way the hell away from your own core settlements. So if Carthage doesn't betray you, This is a very safe way to play. The main issue in the Carthage versus Rome pact is that Carthage doesn't have the spam of armies coming out that Rome does. Carthage will put up a very long fight, but nearly always, if the AI is left to its own devices, Rome will beat Carthage 9 times out of 10 at least. 9.9 times out of 10. The only thing that's stopping them really is player intervention. You can change the tide of the war if you play your cards right and help Carthage out when they need it. Basically, Rome completely outclasses the Carthaginian infantry. However, the cavalry is definitely subpar. While Carthage gets access to your good cavalry, he can't trust the AI to use that cavalry well. So as such, you can come in and sway things in the balance to be favorable to Carthage. That's option number 1. Basically, you stay at home with just these 2 settlements and then you expand in the distance, which I don't really recommend. I don't like having my cities separated. I don't even like having these 2 cities being this much separated. I don't like that. It bothers me. I don't know why, but it just does. That's just a personal dumb thing. I like to have my countries and nations in games like this consolidated and solid in one giant blob. But anyway, option number 2. What is option number 2? Option number 2 is basically within the first 15 to 20 turns, you throw all of this out the window and you go ahead and you just declare war. Declare war on Carthage. If you do that, you should want to have at least 2 armies ready, one to come in and take Aihol, and then the other to come over and take Thapsus and Carthage itself. Or perhaps you could do it the other way around, where you take Carthage and Thapsus first, and then come in and take Aihol, and then take over the western sections of Carthage. Or you could devote yourself entirely to these. It's up to you how you want to betray them, but that is option number 2. Betray Carthage, become the Numidian Carthage, really. And see basically if you could pull off the Punic Wars better than Carthage itself. Perhaps you can, perhaps you can't, I don't know. But that is basically your only 2 options. I mean, there is always the option of migrating, but I wouldn't recommend it in this. You're in a fairly safe territory in regards to Rome. Rome will come for Carthage and they will come for you as a result. So you will end up fighting Rome at some point. However, if you take over Carthage quickly, it might give you enough time to build up an economy that will make you unstoppable even against the massive amount of troops that Rome will be pumping at you. And even then, if you are quick in taking out Carthage, which will be hard, it's easy to say, hard to do, but if you take Carthage out, say within the first 50 turns, then Rome will still have enemies in the north above them. Not Etruria, they'll take them out within the first 10 turns. Epirus usually lasts till about 20 turns in-ish. Yeah, even then 20's kind of stretching it. But then they'll also have enemies up here in the north. Germans coming in from the northeast, Gauls coming in from the northwest. Hopefully Rome will also take over Apollonia, which means that they'll be fighting in Greece. However, even then they won't be sending too many armies into Greece until they deal with some of the Illyrians. So basically, if you do take over Africa and become Carthage in your own right, you will then want to time attacking Rome at the same time that they're busy fighting other nations. That's really all you can hope for, because their military obviously outclasses yours in almost every single way. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in the military section, which is coming up now. That's it for the campaign overview for the Masaesyli, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully I haven't left anything out that is too important. But anyway, now let's jump into the part 2 section of this video, where we check out the military of the Masaesyli. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the part 2 section of this video, where we'll check out the military of the Masaesyli. So once again, however, we are not checking out the navy section for this faction. It's just not worth it. They only have a total of 4 units besides their admiral ships. Really terrible. Basically just try not to engage the enemy on your dedicated naval ships. If you do have to recruit a navy, which you probably will at some point, try to recruit as many mercenaries as possible, because your dedicated naval units are just not that good whatsoever, and they are also very low in their ship health. So what few units you do have are almost like operating glass cannons, and even then they're not really cannons. So Like I said, just try to keep your navies away from the enemy, especially from Carthage. Carthage will wipe the floor with anything you send against them. Even mercenaries will give them a very good run for their money. But anyway, obviously that means that we have to talk about the land units of the Masaesyli. So here we are with perhaps your most single important unit in your entire military roster, your general's bodyguard. This is one of your two options you have. You can have this unit, or you can have an elite spearmen unit that's on foot. I would choose this unit, the Numidian Noble Cavalry, any day of the week, even as a garrison general. It is just too friggin' fantastic to ignore.
Numidian Noble Cavalry!
This unit is arguably your best single piece of cavalry that you get access to. You do have better shock cav, and you do have some pretty good skirmisher cav, but this kinda does it all. It has a melee attack of 13, melee defense of 12, so it will survive against others in extended combat for quite a while. Shield value of 4, which is okay. It'll do some protection against missiles, but not really all that much, considering they're on horseback. So, off the bat though, that's pretty good stats for melee encounters. You have a charge bonus of 37, which is pretty low, but when you consider that this is really more so a dedicated skirmisher unit and melee cavalry unit, it's not really too bad at all. It could have even been lower, so that charge bonus does mean that you can still do some extra damage while on the charge. However, because you are using just small Numidian horses, your charges will definitely be lower compared to that of some like Egyptian or Seleucid style cavalry units. Obviously the Far Easterners, Persia and Parthia and such will completely outclass you, but you can charge into the enemy and get kills. You even have a weapon damage of 32, which is pretty fantastic really, and armor 31, which is kind of low, except not when you're considering that you are a Numidian faction. So 31 is actually really good. Quite impressed with that. However, it does not get any better for your general's bodyguard, really. That's it. But considering what a versatile unit this is, I can't complain about it, really. I shouldn't even list negatives, to be honest. It has a range of 95, which is actually fairly decent. Your Numidian skirmisher dedicated cav only have a range of 85 instead of 95. Missile damage is at 23, which is actually very good. 8 of which is armor piercing, which is fantastic. That will be very helpful in fighting the Romans and the heavy units from Carthage. However, there is one thing that I want to get out of the way now. I'll try not to repeat it too much, or at least go into it too much, but one thing you will note when I click on this unit is that you have an insane amount of abilities down here, and this is really what separates the roster of the Masaesyli from the rest of the units in the game. At least the rest of the rosters in the game. Now, obviously, you have a friggin' tiny roster. This is the smallest roster we've covered so far. It's easily a contender for being the smallest roster for any faction in the entire game. It is very tiny. The Scythian nomads will just have fewer units, but only just barely. You have a tiny roster. However, you are very unique in that you have, first off, you have the Numidian horse, which is quite smaller than others, but it is very fast. And as such, you actually have the perk. Is it listed here? Let me just see if I can find the little icon. There's 1,000 different icons here. Ah, damn it, we can't. Okay. That's alright. So, oh wait, no, we do have it. Yes, awesome. We have the Ignore Terrain perk. This is an insanely powerful perk. What the description says is speed penalties caused by the terrain are ignored by this unit. As long as that's still holding true, which I believe it is, as far as I'm concerned. I've even done testing and I didn't notice any differences. But ignoring terrain for your unit of cavalry is really powerful. It means that you can still get solid charges against enemies in complete forest. It means that your units can escape enemy cavalry units even if they're faster than yours, which is unlikely because you're a Numidian horse. Speed of 8, which is fantastic. It's the best it gets. You'll be able to lose enemy cavalry very quickly. So that is a fantastic perk to have. In addition, you're of course immune to heat and desert attrition, which is awesome. Parthian shot which means that you can fire in a 360-degree circle. Not all skirmisher cav has this. You can fire while moving, which is very helpful. You can hide in grass, you can hide in the forest, you can hide in scrub and forest, and you have guerrilla deployment. Basically, your Numidian cavalry are fantastically skilled, and all of these abilities apply to all of your cavalry units. At least all of the abilities are listed, sorry. So that means guerrilla deployment, and then the ignoring terrain, the resistant to heat, the Parthian shot. All of that applies to all of your cavalry units, even including your shock cavalry, which are also listed here as ignoring terrain, which is, oh wait, no, sorry, that's your Numidians. Yeah, Numidian heavy cavalry, they're right here. Now let's double check that they have this perk. Yep, ignore terrain right there. And that's your shock cavalry. So I'll just get that out of the way now. I won't repeat it every single time for each unit. But it is very powerful, and it's very useful, so do keep that in mind. However, now let's move on to your skirmishers, which is basically the largest section of your roster. As you can see, you have 5 different units to choose from, not including cavalry.
Slingers!
You have Numidian slingers. These are really terrible slingers. Nothing special about them at all. Yeah, just you have slingers. That's all I can say. They have an ammunition of 20, which is nice, but I believe that's pretty standard among most slingers. Archers usually have 15. So yeah, I'm trying to find something useful to say about them, but I can't. They don't even have guerrilla deployment, but they are resistant to heat, but so is all of your units, so that doesn't really matter too much.
Missile infantry ready!
Numidian archers are just that, Numidian archers. Once again, nothing special at all, nothing special about your melee stats. These guys also do not have guerrilla deployment, so that is a bit of a shame. It'd be nice if at least the archers had some. Maybe not slingers, but I mean, it'd be nice if both of them had it, really. They're just basically bottom tier levy units for each category of skirmishing that they represent archery and slingers.
My lord!
Then you have your Numidian skirmishers, who are also the exact same bottom tier units for that category.
Orders, my lord!
Then you have the Numidian elite pelters, so this is where things get very, very amped up. Let's get some close-ups while I do some talking about them. Now these guys are special. Not only are they a peltus unit, which is basically a Greek style unit, so you'll get these after your Greek reforms that you have to endure, which is the Furios reforms and Thorax reforms. I won't repeat them every single time because I repeated the Greek reform listing quite a bit, and it's always the same. Imperium level 3, minimum turns of 50 for your Furios reforms, and Thorax Imperium level 5. Minimum turns of 120, but that's all I'm saying. I'm not repeating it anymore, at least not for a while. But basically, this Greek style unit that you get access to is very, very unique in that not only do you have this skirmishing ability, what I mean by that is the ability to actually skirmish, to throw javelins or throw anything at the enemy. You also have fantastic armor at 35. That is almost legendary. That's friggin' fantastic for your roster, because all of your units, besides the general we just looked at, all had no armor at all. They were naked, pretty much. These guys jump all the way up to 35 armor. In addition, they have a melee attack of 10, which is very, very nice. A melee defense of 14, with 7 of which belonging to your shield. So these guys will not only survive against skirmisher fire for a very long time, which is awesome, they also have very good stats in melee. Basically, these guys are one of your most useful units that you will get in your entire campaign. Again, looking very nice, just like your general was. The generic units were looking good, but they're just generic units, so you can only expect so much from them. But these guys, they look professional, and they are very professional. Loving the wall paint too, Sunny Jim. Fantastic. These guys are ready to rock. However, what abilities do they have? Well, they don't really have all that much. They don't have the guerrilla deployment perk, apparently. I thought that they did, but they don't. And that's a really big hurt on them. I would actually like to see that change, to be honest. The guerrilla deployment would really help them out quite a lot. Especially when all of your cavalry has guerrilla deployment. Not sure why the pelters don't get it. I know it might make them a bit OP, but I mean, your roster is so pathetic. You really need whatever you can get in the OP department, so I would like to see that happen, but it isn't happening, so that's what we got to go with. And then you have your Numidian Peltas. These guys are not necessarily a levy unit. In fact, they're quite a step up from it, but they are below your elite Peltas, as they should be. They have an armor 25, still very respectable, very good for your roster. Melee attack is a little bit lower at 9. Melee defense is at 12, so basically just slightly lower statistics across the board compared to your elites. Again, they have a nice large shield, so it'll give you some skirmisher protection, but you won't last as long against enemy skirmishers. But that's your skirmisher department, really. Unfortunately, no guerrilla deployment among any of these units, which is really surprising. I could have sworn that there was some, but no, I'm guessing not. Anyway, that's it for your skirmishing department. Now we move on to your infantry, your massive 2 units. At least your 2 swordsman units you get access to. This is part of your core roster. Obviously, there's more in the campaign you can pick up. That is a bit of a disclaimer, I probably should have said earlier. You can still recruit AOR units from villages that you take over, cities you take over, and you can still take any kind of mercenary unit that you like as long as you can get into the region to recruit them. So, while things are looking terrible so far for your roster, you do have the option of recruiting a lot of very good mercenary units very close to you. Sicily and North Africa have some of the best mercenary pools there are, so don't fret too much.
Swordsman!
However, I say that, but then we look at your swordsman unit, the Numidian swordsmen. These guys, oh man, they look awesome. Very nice big shields, which means that they have a good melee defense. However, you will note not a single one of them has any armor whatsoever. They have these hats, but they're more hats than helmets. And as such, they have an armor of 1, which is pathetic. These guys will die to any kind of damage coming their way. They do have the melee defense of 12, but however 7 of that comes from your shield, so they're not even very skilled at defending themselves. Melee attack of 9, which is okay, but it's actually lower than your elite Peltas, and it's the same as your Numidian Peltas. And they have the same defense, so really you may as well just use your Peltas unit. They do have a surprisingly decent morale of 46, which is kind of interesting. I'm surprised that they have that much. Yeah, your Numidian Peltas only have 39 morale, so I wonder why that is. But anyway, what is interesting about them is that they have 300 men per unit, which means that you can spam these out. They come from your commoner social class, so as such they won't be a massive drain on your population. Spam these guys at the enemy. Hopefully they will do some damage with their okay-ish attack at 9 and decent weapon damage at 23. And hopefully that will wear down some of the enemy Romans or Carthaginians, whoever's coming your way. But they won't be your main battle line. Not with an armor of 1. Nothing will with an armor of 1. If you're using a battle line with just an armor of 1, I want to have a talk with you. Nah, I mean, people try whatever they like, but far out. If you're doing a battle line with an armor of 1 for any kind of unit, good luck with that. I mean, maybe cavalry's different, but that's a whole different style of fighting.
Our orders!
However, then we jump all the way up to your Numidian legionnaires. They are exactly what is advertised. They are Numidians that have been trained by Roman advisors in the art of being a legionnaire. They have a fantastic armor of 35, base morale of 49, which is fantastic. That's almost as high as your general's bodyguard. They have a melee attack of 10, defense of 14, charge bonus is only at 15 though. Weapon damage is at 25. Just a really, really solid unit overall. Look amazing. Basically Numidian legionnaires. I mean, no shit. Yes, they are Numidian legionnaires, but you know what I mean? Like, this is not what you would expect from a Numidian roster. When you hear the word legionnaire, you picture a Roman-style legionnaire. But this really is Numidian legionnaires. They look fantastic. They have cool armor, very nice chainmail, probably imported from Italy, I guess. They just look very, very nice. In addition, they have the disciplined formation ability. They have the testudo ability.
Formation, move!
And then they have the defensive testudo
Organize
ability.
yourselves!
Very helpful ability, as they will help you withstand a lot of damage, throwing you away. However, some of these abilities will severely hamper your attack. And in fact, the testudos apparently makes it so you have no attack potential at all. That's what it says in the description. I don't know if I buy that. Unit assumes tortoise formation, making itself nearly impenetrable to missile damage, which is very, very nice. But while in formation, the unit has no attack. I wonder if it's no or just extremely little. But either way, it's a very useful formation ability to have when you're soaking up enemy fire. So use that when you need to. Discipline formation will also help out. It basically is kind of the same, except it means that you stay in a wider formation. As such, this is the kind of formation you'll use in a battle line that's about to be charged. However, that is it for your swordsman. You have 2 units to choose from. Furthermore, we then jump up to your spearmen. Now, actually, we'll ignore this unit. We'll come to this unit first. You have your Numidian spearmen. These guys are the bottom of your 2 spearmen that you get access to. However, they have an insanely good defense of 17, which is pretty incredible. 7 coming from your shield, 10 coming from their skill in defense. Bonus versus cavalry and elephants of 10. Armor of 10, which is kind of surprising since they look like they're wearing nothing but cloth. But yeah, they have an armor of 10 according to the stats here. Base morale of 43. And they have a melee attack of 7, which isn't too terrible. And they have 300 men per unit. So this will be an incredibly useful unit for you. I wouldn't use it in the main battle line, but I guess you could. That defense will make them last for quite a while. However, if they're getting hammered by skirmisher fire, that low armor will definitely come into play and they will die off quite quickly. But yeah, fantastic melee defense. Get these guys into melee attacks with enemy cavalry and they will do absolute wonders for you. Very nice unit. 300 men per unit, keep in mind, and they come from your commoners section. Then we jump all the way up to the Numidian Guard. This is your other general's bodyguard unit you get access to. Melee defense of 21 straight off the bat. That is, wow, very, very impressive. Melee attack is at 9, which is, it sounds kind of low, but it's actually pretty good considering your defense is so high as well. So you will be killing people while you're in a defensive position. Charge bonus is low at 21. Weapon damage at 26. Bonus versus cavalry and elephants is at 14, which is very nice. Armor is at 28. It's pretty good. It could be a little bit higher, maybe like 32, something like that. But I mean, your melee defense of 21, 7 of which comes from your shield. That is just friggin' insane. These guys will last in any kind of melee combat for a very long time indeed. They will survive against skirmisher fire very, very well as well. Not as well as the legionnaires in a testudo formation, but pretty friggin' close. So I wouldn't let it weigh them down too much. But yeah, I'd almost like to see that armor boosted up a tiny bit. Maybe to try and balance it, you could have their upkeep be slightly higher to represent upkeeping the maintenance required for the mail, chainmail and such that they use. However, once again, we do not see any further guerrilla deployment perks, which is very interesting. And in fact, looking back on it, it seems like none of your infantry have guerrilla deployment. That's crazy to me. Oh wait, no, we have archers. Wait, no we don't. I thought we had archers that do it. I keep getting it mixed up with this Numidian cavalry unit. We don't have any guerrilla deployment. Wow, man. That's a big letdown, I feel like. I mean, they're in the desert areas, so I guess ambushes in the North African deserts will be difficult, but it is a very mountainous region that these Numidians are from, so that is very interesting. I'd like to see your feedback down below on what you think about the lack of guerrilla deployment. Do you think they should have it in their roster? I would like to see it, but I'm sure there's some sort of balancing issues that have come into play, and the devs decide not to do that. But anyway, now we move on to your cavalry. You're done entirely with your infantry, Ignore that unit in the background, that's just an extra bodyguard unit I brought in by accident. However, we then move on to the cream, the crop, the green jewel of the Numidians.
Median cavalry.
Your skirmisher cavalry, both of your units here are very, very, very nice indeed when it comes to skirmishing. I'll basically cover your Numidian medium cavalry because the Numidian skirmisher cav are the same, but lower in pretty much every single category regarding statistics, even their morale and everything. So we'll focus on the Numidian medium cav. So you have a respectable damage of 22, a range of 90, shots per minute of 7, which is quite nice. Ammunition of 9 javelins is very nice to be throwing into the enemy. But then you come into one of the most interesting aspects, a melee attack of 13. That's insane, that's super high for a skirmisher cav unit. And even then, it's balanced by having very nice defense at 10. Are you kidding me? That's insane, that's awesome. They do have a low shield rating of just 2 though. But a melee defense of 10 means that they will survive for quite a while in an extended melee. However, their armor is only at 18, which is not bad at all. But it does mean that that will come into play in an extended melee and against skirmisher fire. Skirmishers will annihilate your skirmisher cavalry, so keep them out of harm's way if possible. But furthermore, they have a charge bonus of 37, weapon damage of 32. Basically, these guys are almost the exact same as your general's bodyguard except for armor, morale, range, missile damage, and melee attack. But beyond that, these guys are incredible. You'll get access to them fairly early on, so try to get them when you can. But because they're so fantastic, it also means your Numidian skirmisher cav, which are the bottom tier of these two units, are actually still fantastic, even though that they have lower stats across the board compared to this unit. Relatively speaking, they're still fantastic, and they come from your common or social class, so use them as much as possible. Both of these units have guerrilla deployment, like I said, all your cav does. I'll try to avoid the abilities talk again. But yeah, just be careful with your Numidian skirmishers. They have no armor, and as such they will get annihilated by enemy skirmisher fire.
Ready to ride.
Then we jump up to your dedicated shock cavalry you get, which is the Numidian heavy cav. They are dedicated shock cav, however they are also fantastic in melee. They do only have a charge bonus of 37. It's kind of a bit of a letdown, but they have a melee attack of 13, a defense of 12, weapon damage of 32, bonus versus infantry of 4, which is quite helpful, especially on the charge, base morale of 49, armor of 38. Basically, they're a melee version of your noble cav that you should get access to, so that's why they're not as good as your noble cavalry. Even though they have better armor, so it could be argued that they're better. Melee defense stats are the same though. Again, share all the same abilities, but the Numidian noble cavalry have javelins to throw at the enemy, whereas these guys only have the one, and then that's it. They only have 1 ammunition, so very nice unit. I would prefer to have Numidian noble cavalry over this unit, but if for whatever reason you don't want to have any skirmishing ability, or you just prefer these guys for some reason, you can recruit them. But yeah, they only have slightly more armor. That's really the only edge that these guys have. So that's your dedicated shock / dedicated melee unit, really. It could be used for both. Possibly even arguable it's more so for melee, but really it's just a dedicated heavy cavalry unit. That is its role, being a heavy cav unit. Now we will move on to your last two final units, which is of course your elephants. Masaesyli obviously gets access to North African elephants, which are quite small. However, one of the interesting things that the Masaesyli get is more elephants than what is per usual for some of these units. In fact, you have 22 elephants in your largest elephant unit.
War elephant.
There lives 44 people here, but that's because you have a rider directing the elephant, and then on top of them you actually have a skirmisher. But these skirmishers are only javelin men. They are not archers or anything else. I know some of the elephants have archers, like the Indian elephants, but these guys just chuck a javelin. Does have good missile damage at 24, which is actually quite impressive, but the range is only 90. So these guys on top will basically just be getting extra kills while your elephants do the real killing down below. Beyond that, there isn't too much to say about your elephants. They are quite small, and as such they don't have as much mass as other elephants. They don't have very good armor whatsoever at only 4, so they're extremely vulnerable to enemy skirmishers, javelins, any kind of skirmisher at all. So as such, they are effectively glass cannons, really. They move quite fast because they are smaller and less heavily armored than, say, Syrian elephants. But if you put them in a 1 versus 1 versus those heavier elephants, you got to be careful. So be wary of that when you take your army up against Egypt in the east. But in the west, they will dominate. They'll be very helpful for you in taking out Rome. Your Numidian skirmisher cavalry and noble cavalry will annihilate the enemy cav. This is the unit that will annihilate the enemy infantry. You even have the poorer version here, which is basically a smaller size unit, so you don't have as many elephants. You have 18 compared to 22. But in addition, you also have lower statistics in that you don't have any skirmishers on top. However, the only other difference statistically is a base morale of 33 compared to 36 for your other elephants. So that's the only difference. The skirmishers will help you get that extra 30, 40, 50 kills maybe. But in my opinion, these skirmishers aren't incredible. But it is helpful, so you can't deny that. So you may as well just get the more expensive unit, really. They're just slightly more useful, although both elephants have the same amount of armor, which is a little concerning. But that is your roster in its entirety, ladies and gentlemen. This is probably our shortest military coverage for any faction overview I've done so far. If you have any questions, please feel free to throw them down below. But now we will jump on in to the part 3 verdict of the Masaesyli. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the part 3 section of this video, where we will check out the verdict for the Masaesyli. So what is the deal with the Masaesyli? Well, my first point, for your military to do its work right, is that you need to use 2 things. One, you need to use your cavalry to your absolute advantage. Every single battle you do, it has to be on the open field, and it has to be in a position where you can outflank the enemy and annihilate their cavalry with your own. You have fantastic cav. Put them to use if at all possible. The second thing is that you have pretty solid pelter skirmishers, so try to use those to your advantage as well. Let them come in and deal with enemy elephants, enemy heavy cav, and enemy heavy infantry. They will help you out a massive amount. Unfortunately, the rest of your skirmishers are very basic. I wouldn't recruit them too much, if the only reason being to try and distract the enemy skirmishers and try and deal as much damage as possible to the enemy skirmishers before they annihilate your very lowly armored low tier units that you have access to. So the second part of what to do with your military, though, is that you need to swarm the enemy. Not only do you need to outflank them with your excellent cav, but you need to use your infantry and your large segments of infantry, such as your spearmen that are 300 men strong, your swordsmen that are 300 men strong. Use those in the early game to swarm the enemy, tire them out, and annihilate them with the amount of rear charges that you'll be dealing with them in the rear. In addition to elephants as well. Elephants will, of course, win you the day in any battle if you can guide them correctly just into the right slot. Now that I've said that, I won't reiterate my point about Carthage and your decisions there. Just keep in mind what I did say in the part 1 section of this video, where I talked about your 2 options that Carthage has. Go back and check that out if you skipped ahead too much or if you missed it. You have 2 options in dealing with Carthage. Think about them very, very thoroughly before you even press the end turn button on turn 1. However, since you will struggle against Rome, it also means that you will struggle against any similar style armies, and that means Hellenic armies. Pike armies in particular will annihilate your melee units. You really have to be careful for the pike style armies of Egypt and the Seleucids, Macedon when it does come down to it, if you do ever bump into them. But Egypt in particular, you'll definitely be fighting at one point. Even Cyrenaica uses pikemen. Be very careful. Those pikemen will annihilate you if you let your infantry engage them from the front, which you never want to do anyway. Even with your own pikemen, you probably wouldn't want to. So be careful of that. The Greeks will give you a severe run for your money, and they have fantastic cavalry to try and counter your own. Not as good skirmisher cav, but they have some fantastic options, so be very, very careful. You're going to have to do some pretty friggin' amazing generalship to win the day against a solid Hellenic army with the core roster that you have at your disposal. Obviously not taking into account Merc and AOR units. And my final point is that the Iberians are very similar to you militarily, although they probably outclass you in the infantry department. As I said before, your skirmisher cav are fantastic. You will outclass them in that option. However, they do have good cavalry that can catch your cav if you're not careful. And as such, I would try to direct your armies towards the Iberians when possible. You will be about on a level playing field. They'll probably be slightly ahead of you if you're not using enough mercenaries and ARR units to back up your mainline infantry, but you will really, really need to. So, considering this video, ladies and gentlemen, what kind of difficulty rating are we going to be giving this? Well, at first glance, the Masaesyli kind of appear like they have a pretty easy starting position since they're nestled in by Carthage. However, considering the fact that Carthage and any of your allies can declare war on you literally any single point in the campaign, and it happened in my testing on multiple occasions, at least 2, and I believe I've had one before, although that was quite a while ago, so it's very concerning that Carthage can declare war on you so easily. But because they have done that in my testing, I have to put that into account. Combining your awkward position, your possibly very unsafe starting position, and your very poor military overall, I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. This is a very hard faction in my opinion. These guys can have the potential to have a very easy campaign in that you could manipulate Carthage to be super useful to you and basically make them do all of the heavy lifting against Rome, and then you come in and snipe the enemy settlements. But at the end of the day, anything is possible in any campaign, and the Masaesyli are definitely a prime example of that. You are what should be a loyal client state of Carthage. You should be basically serving them in their own armies. However, like I said, anything can happen. They can declare war on you at any point, no matter how friendly you get with them. And as such, you do have to be careful of backstabbing. And even if that all goes well with Carthage, you have to go very far away from your core province to actually begin to annex enemy territory, unless you try and fight people who are friendly with the Carthaginians, such as the Masaesyli to your southeast, which I don't recommend at all. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have to say about the Masaesyli. That's been a very highly requested faction in my videos, so apologize it took me so long to get to it, but here we are finally. As always, please do leave future suggestions for faction overviews down below. I'm always open to any suggestions and discussion, and of course criticism. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I shall see you in the next one.